everyone. Whether you are a basketball fan watching March Madness or a prestige TV fan tuning into HBO every Sunday, you are probably spending a lot of time these days thinking about Durham, North Carolina, which, as you may know, is where I live. As a native Southerner, I am used to the strange phenomenon of watching actors, sometimes even British and Australian actors, trying to take on the really specific mannerisms and accents of the place where I grew up. Sometimes you get total catastrophe. I am still mad about Kevin Spacey's ludicrous choices with Southern accents in both Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil and House of Cards. But then you've got Jason Isaacs and Parker Posey and what they're doing on the White Lotus, which is totally fascinating, and then for really different reasons. Jason Isaacs is British, of course, and he is really nailing a lot of really specific Southern intonations. And he pulls off sounding a lot like the blow-dried politicians who I grew up seeing on TV, many of whom were revealed later on, like Isaacs' White Lotus character, to be white-collar criminals. And then meanwhile, Parker Posey is actually from Mississippi, and she's doing this accent that isn't really regionally specific, but it's kind of from the same planet in outer space where all wealthy, oblivious Southern white women secretly come from. Her work is iconic. It's been memed all over the place. She's absolutely this season's equivalent of Jennifer Coolidge in the first two seasons. And I promise you, as unlikely as it sounds, there really are people who talk this way. So I've been obsessing over the White Lotus like everybody else for the past few weeks. And then I was so glad to see one of my favorite online creators talking about the show and specifically about its accents. Landon Bryant, who I know from TikTok and Instagram as Landon Talks, is from the same town in Mississippi as Parker Posey. He actually remembers her dad owning the local car dealership and being in the commercials. Landon posted a video earlier this month, basically arguing what I said above. If you go to the country club in Laurel, Mississippi, you will find packs of women talking just like Parker Posey's character. So I asked Landon to join me on this week's show to talk about the White Lotus and Southern accents in Parker Posey, but also in general how the South is depicted in TV and film, and then how there are creators like Landon who are bringing a more authentic version of the South to the internet and maybe eventually Hollywood. Next week, I'll be talking to Natalie Jarvie, my colleague at The Ankler, about the creator economy, so this is maybe a preview of talking about how creators are heading for Hollywood, whether they're ready or not. In addition to his videos, Landon tours as a stand-up comedian and also has a new book out called Bless Your Heart, a field guide to all things Southern. It's for sale today. So join me and Landon on a journey into Southern accents, the enduring magic of steel magnolias and designing women, and then why you should get Landon's note on your script if you are trying to write something set in the South. I'm Katey Rich, and this is the Prestige Junkie Podcast. Landon Bryant, better known in my household as Landon Talks, beloved interpreter of the South for so many of us. I mean, first of all, thank you for being here. You really are like my personal internet celebrity. So I'm just very grateful that you wanted to come and talk TV and Southern accents with me.
I'm so glad to be here. I'm so glad that you invited me. It's such an honor. The Prestige podcast, even. Like,
this is all the prestige that you've been waiting for, right?
Yes, they've been waiting.
So you have TikTok and Instagram accounts. You're the author of a new book. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the way that I figured our worlds finally overlapped is that you posted a video about Parker Posey's accent on the White Lotus, which we're going to hear some of these accents in a minute. But tell me first how you decided it was time for you to weigh in on this.
It was time. It was time to weigh in. Well, what happened was I had just left the Laurel Country Club, and her family was there, and all our family.
Parker Posey's actual real life family.
Parker Posey's actual real life family, and amongst the other ladies of the town, the garden ladies, you know, and that's exactly what they sound like. And if you had mixed in a bunch of lorazepam into the food at lunch that day, it would really sound like that. So I don't know. I just felt like it was time to say something. Also, I have this like ongoing fascination with Parker Posey because I grew up here, and she's like royalty in the town. And her daddy owned Chris Posey Nissan, so we all bought cars from her daddy.
Car dealership. That is local royalty.
It is, because they were on the TV, the commercials, you know, like there was so many jingles.
So does she get the acting, like the on-camera presence from her dad, do you think?
I think she might. It must run in the family. They're very charismatic on a television, you know. I don't know. They do it really well. So I learned a lot from her, and she was just sort of this like local legend, right? So when you see people like her, Mary Elizabeth Ellis is from here, Aaron and Ben Napier, the guy from Green Acres, Leontine Price, all these people we just like exist with sometimes in the town when they're here. And she's one that I've existed with. All the other people I have talked to or spoken with. Parker's the only one I haven't like actually like been made the connection of friends with. Now I'm friends with her cousins, but not actually physically her. And a couple of years ago at our museum gala, went straight up to her and was just like, "I love you," and then she like immediately left. So, this
too much local connection. She couldn't handle it.
Too much. It was too much. And so that was like me being like, "Sorry to you, Parker. Please notice me in a different way." Like
I feel like because you're from Laurel, Mississippi, I feel like that's really punching. Like for a small town, that's a lot of famous people. Like, is there something in the water that's got all these people coming from there?
And that's not even the athletes. There's a bunch of athletes. I just have never cared. But yeah, there must be. We think about that all the time. Laurel is a unique town. It was founded from people from North Carolina even. They came from North Carolina. And when it was founded, their wives were like, "You have to make this cool or we're not coming." So there's this, they really did. So there's a lot of green space. There's a lot of focus on the arts. We have an incredible museum here that's free for everybody. It's been open for 100 years, actually. Wow. It's got a Rodin and Chihuly's and like all these incredible paintings. And so I think the town just kind of from its base, from its foundation, thanks to those ladies, focuses on the arts and focuses on performance and theater. And then what is a Southern town if not one giant performance,
Mm-hmm.
So
that is how I have always felt.
All that comes together to make whatever this is that's happening here in this place.
Yeah. So Parker Posey's accent really like, there's so much on the White Lotus that grabs people attention. And obviously Jason Isaacs, he's a British actor also doing a Southern accent. We can talk about him, but you really can't miss it. So Brett, my producer, has kind of got us a clip we can listen to and other people that listeners can hear as well to hear what we're talking about here.
Great.
You want to what? I'm
move here after I graduate. Just like at least for a year.
Move here and do what?
Meditate. And like immerse myself so I can really understand Buddhism and develop my spirituality.
But you're not a Buddhist.
Yes, I am, Mom.
Honey, you're not from China.
What does that have to do with anything?
You can be interested in this stuff, but you could never really be it. We're from an entirely different world.
Okay, well, you call yourself a Christian, but you weren't born in Bethlehem.
Well, everyone I know is a Christian. My parents were Christians. Your parents are Christians.
Okay, so it's not just that. But so the accent, I think, is one thing, and there's so many regional accents in the South, and we can talk about it. But there's something about that, like, rich Southern woman who's like, "No, that's not true. Like, what you're saying to me is not true." That part feels the truest to me. What do you think?
The gaslighting is gaslighting, isn't it? It is really something. And the way I think, even when she finished that conversation, she was like, didn't she call Thailand Taiwan?
I think so.
That is just right on par. I mean, that is like Mike White clearly spent some time around Southern women because that conversation right there, the Buddhism, and then obviously the viral clip is hilarious as well. But yeah, no, that is so relative. I mean, small town especially. And this is still a small town. I mean, it's much bigger, but we're 2 hours from any major airport. So anytime I've got to go somewhere, it's a long drive. It's a very insulated area, Mm-hmm. So everybody's a Christian and your mom and daddy were, like that type of attitude is just so real. That is so real. That whole conversation, the first time I heard it, I was like, wow. And then her calling Thailand Taiwan with no regard, just like no regard. Only what matters is here,
Yes. Or like our family and the way we have always done things.
Yes.
And if you're trying to break out of it, I just think every kid who grew up in the South, maybe everywhere, has had something with their parents. They're like, no, it doesn't have to be that way anymore. And it's like, well, no, that's how your grandma did it, so it's how you have to do it.
That's how your mom and them have always done it.
Well, and this family's supposed to be from Durham, North Carolina, which is where I live, which I think is a little bit bigger than where you are. There is an airport here, there's Duke University and everything, and there's been a lot of local debate about like which neighborhood these people are from, because it's not just that they're Southern, they're kind of that like level of wealth that's like above everything else. And I think that's more what the White Lotus is about than, the usual stuff you're doing on your page. But like there's a specific rich Southern people here too.
I totally agree. There's so many, the South is so varied. It's not a monolith. Even in my one town, there's so many different accents. There's so many different groups of people. There's so many different cultures, and there's not very many people in this town. But it's what you're hearing in her accent is wealth. That's like money. That's what you hear there in her accent is money. Yeah. It's not a regular Southern accent. That's a wealthy Southern accent. And that's a totally different thing. But it's fascinating because it's so right.
Mm-hmm. It hits you somewhere in the soul, even if the region is weird.
Yes.
Yeah. So you are more of a creature of TikTok and Instagram than I am, so you've probably seen even more of this. We've got a clip of one of the many dance remixes of her on the Today Show talking about this accent.
Yes.
So we're going to listen to that one next.
Tsunami. Buddhism. No. Tsunami. Tsunami.
I don't know if I have a question about this. It just hits so hard.
It's just so good. It's such an earworm, and it's just fantastic. The way she chews on those words, just delicious.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's hilarious.
Yeah.
And the way she says Buddhism as if it's like a dirty word, hilarious. Hilarious.
The thing that I've agreed on with my mom, who is also from the South, who knows these country club women so well, is that there are so many people who we know whose accents aren't really from anywhere. They have an authentic Southern accent, but they don't sound like anyone else in the town that they're from. So you can really get yourself hung up on the regional differences, but these women are kind of from outer space, and that's really kind of their power.
And I think it is very fascinating. And obviously, this is a small town, so I can't name any names. But I know a few women who, as they got older and got to travel a little bit more, their accents changed. They even got a little bit more British, which it sort of lines up to Jason Isaacs, because I feel like, and if you look at linguists, Southern accents are just slowed down versions of certain British accents,
Totally.
And I think Jason Isaacs is capturing that very well, whether purposefully or not. I think that is there. But yeah, your accent can change throughout your life here as well. And then generational accents are different. The accents can change. It's almost like a way to be exotic in the small town, a way to have a little bit of something different about you, something exciting, but not too different, but a little bit excitement.
And if you think of Truman Capote, people from the South who become famous, they play it up. If that's part of it.
Oh, yeah.
I lived in New York for a long time and kind of lost any accent I ever had. But I think if you really want to make it part of your thing, you can just lean all the way in.
Oh yeah, for so sure. I didn't even, and this is the honest truth. When I started whatever it is I do now, whatever this is, I did not think I had that much of a Southern accent, and that's true. I really didn't, because if you go 5 miles into the woods, they get real thicker. It's a lot thicker, a lot slower. So it was something that I thought I was kind of absent of an accent. It's really accents will sneak in and get you with when you're least expecting it. It turns out I do have an accent. The whole internet tells me all the time. But yeah,
this is something I learned. My parents would come visit me in college. They'd be like, "Your parents did these accents." I'd be really?
Well, when you called home from New York City, did you?
Oh my God!
Could people tell?
I was in a car and I called my grandmother, and they all looked at me like, "Who are you?" It was amazing. I didn't think I was doing it, and then all of a sudden it was right there.
To revert back.
Yeah.
Yes.
So with Jason Isaacs, you're giving him the credit for the Britishness. I think is totally right. And then there's linguists, literally Duke University linguists, have talked about how he's not focusing on the right thing. But he bases performance. I think he's been careful in interviews not to say who, but I think it's clear it's Thomas Ravenel from Southern Charm, which is a whole other representative. And there's every now and then there's a line he'll do he'll say money laundering or am I implicated? And you'd be like, oh yeah, that's who that is.
Yes.
There's a smarmy white collar criminal type.
Yes.
That I think he is nailing there.
That's exactly.
I don't think it's as fun as the Parker Poseys, but I'm imagining it's also a familiar type for you too.
I mean, they're in popular culture. We got the Murdals, we got, there's a lot of them. The Ravenel, Mr. Ravenel, all of that type of rich accent. Yeah. He does it pretty well. I feel like he does it pretty well.
I've always said John Edwards, I feel he's the model. He's kind of been forgotten by history, but he was the perfect smarmy guy with too nice hair. You're I don't trust you.
Wow,
something about it.
Nice. And Southern Charm is so interesting. I'm constantly dancing around Southern Charm. I got to go to Patricia Altschul's house, and who is, I think, believe what Parker's basing this character off of,
Yeah, I have questions about caftans. We're going to get there.
Oh, we will. Okay, great. Well, we'll hold Patricia for that.
Well, then let's get to it, though, because I do feel there's a viral clip of her going around just being completely oblivious, and a caftan is part of it. And you've got caftans as a whole part of your book, a whole part of your, the stuff you've done on TikTok. So how do the caftans fit into this for you?
Well, I think a caftan is something to be celebrated. The game here is look good and look fancy and make your family proud while also being as comfortable as you can, because the weather is awful. It's walking around in hot Vaseline, and a caftan is a workaround for that, and Caftans there's a line, like you can have like a duster or a house coat, but when you're like being real fabulous about it and when you bring the money into it, then it becomes a caftan, I feel like. And she is caftan culture. Where else do you wear a caftan but Thailand? I think Pat Altschul is caftan queen. She's the queen of the caftans, even, I would say that. When I went to her house, she floated down her stairs in a cashmere white caftan in July.
That's what the caftans are for. You got to have a staircase.
You've got to have a staircase, and you've got to float. And there's an elegance to a caftan. You know, like you don't really see a caftan in the Dollar General, but you might see a caftan in a little boutique somewhere.
Yep. I feel like I've been shopping at a Dollar General in a bathing suit cover-up, which is like so close to the caftan, but it's like the Dollar General version of that.
But you can like embody the spirit of the caftan in a bathing suit cover-up. It's your attitude. It's all about your attitude. What attitude do you have with it? If you're being fancier than everybody else, then it's the caftan.
There you go. So I wanted to talk about, broaden the White Lotus thing into just like why Southern accents are kind of so captivating for people. And I feel like, people like you and me who are from the South, there's always this moment where you're like, oh, they're doing a Southern accent. Like you get kind of nervous and you feel like you got to get ready to ride to defense. And you, as kind of like a publicly Southern person on the internet, like there's a lot of it out there. So how do you kind of approach like the next time there's a movie or a TV show set in the South that everyone's talking about? What do you brace for? What do you worry about? And how do you feel when it goes right?
Well, I guess growing up Southern and seeing the South in media and popular media, there's not a ton of media that does it correctly, right? And also, until recently, I feel like the South has definitely been like very looked down upon, like barefoot backwards type of a place, you know? And I feel like that is shifting a little bit. Obviously, we've still got like a lot to work out, but I feel like there's more Southernness in popular culture than there used to be. And it's a little bit more exciting, but having that base of growing up 80s, 90s in the South where it wasn't like a popular thing really to be very Southern, I feel like my base perspective on movies and coming into them, if they have something Southern, I automatically assume the worst. Like my level of expectation is so low that it's pretty easy to exceed my expectations now, like I just keep the bar really low because it's never been quite on point. I would say the past few years, though, they're getting better every time. They're getting so much better. Yeah,
what's the stuff lately that you think is working really well before we do the time travel back to the 80s and 90s?
Lately, what's working really well? Let's see. Well, obviously, the White Lotus. They're doing that really, really well. There's some reality TV. This is reality TV, so it is actually her accent. But I've recently watched all of Vanderpump Rules, and Brittany from Vanderpump Rules, when she says, my mom will be mad at me for saying this, but she says, "Rotten hell," and I think that's so funny to him, and that's so good. There are one that I would like to bring up, and I'm not saying it's good, but an accent that has been noteworthy and recently when Patricia Arquette was Gypsy Rose. What do you think about that? I want to know your thoughts on that.
I mean, it's like a big character, Like, is it kind of adjacent to the Parker Posey thing where like you're playing someone who's kind of not of this reality? Like
that is such a good point.
Did you feel like it needed to have more regionalness to it to feel right?
I sort of felt like it was all over the South. Like I felt like it was all Southern accents mixed into one. And that's what's hard to get is like that it can be so different just one county over. So it's like, I feel like Patricia Arquette did a good job with that because I don't know where she's from. But if she's not Southern, then she certainly listened to a bunch of Southern accents and pulled them all in there. What goes wrong is when people start like really laying on their R's and or removing the R's completely. It's
the removing the R, that Charleston thing. And I guess Patricia Arquette, she does kind of talk like that, but she kind of comes by it honestly. Not that many people actually talk like that.
She does. I know not that many people talk like that. They're very wealthy. I was recently at the Charleston Literary Festival and they all talk like that. But I think it was like just the people in that room.
It's like 100 people in Charleston.
It's like those few people. It was just them. It's them. So it's a wealth indicator. It's a wealth type of situation. I think it is interesting about Pat too, because she has, and I'm not saying anything. I'm just going to tell you what a piece of art that she has in her house.
Okay.
It was a piece of art that was all the different benzo pills on the wall.
Wait, do you think Mike White knows about that? Do you think that's where this all came
Possibly from? Is all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. But I feel like that might have something to do with the accent of hers a little bit, So, yes, I got all over the place just in with that answer. But that is there. That's there. Yeah. I have a picture of it, but I'm not supposed to share it.
I'm glad to know that it exists. Well, I was looking at your book, Bless Your Heart, which is out very soon. I guess as people hear this, it will be out already. And there's a Suzanne Sugarbaker shout out in your book. And I was realizing that like designing women, I think was such a huge huge
they do it.
archetypal thing. And like you've got Dixie Carter, obviously iconic Southerner, but also like Jean Smart, who's now like the queen of television again.
Killing
like
it.
she's nailing a Southern accent on that show. Like people could really do it back then.
Libby wouldn't approve, though. She wants me to be, more ambitious, Lady June-wise.
Well, don't let her push you around.
Well, she didn't push me around. I mean, this whole company is just as sweet as they can be. I went to my first local division meeting. I nearly got kissed to death. They're so excited I joined. First then I told them that I was just thinking about doing it temporarily, and they all gave me these real disappointed looks like this. So then I told them I'd consider doing it a little bit longer, and everybody squealed, and it just ended up in a great big group hug.
Designing women, though, that's it right there. Make that Still Magnolias, like anything in a beauty shop or like a design shop, a flower shop, that's really it. But Designing Women, that monologue where she talks about the night the lights went out in Georgia.
Oh my God.
The pageant part.
Yeah.
Just perfectly on. Just perfect.
And 12,000 people jumped to their feet for 16 1/2 minutes of uninterrupted thunderous ovation as flames illuminated her tear-stained face. And that, Marjorie, is the night the lights went out in Georgia.
I think that was just so perfect. They are so good. And also Delta Burke looks like my mom. So I've always felt like
she looks like my mom.
She does, doesn't
Delta
she?
Burke looks like my mom. And then Gerald McRaney, who Delta Burke's been married to in real life, he was Major Dad, looks like my dad. So like the two of them are like my like literal parent celebrity doppelgangers. I would need to meet them someday.
So you like basically wrote Designing Women is what we're saying. That was your thing that you
I feel
did.
like I was raised by Designing Women.
Really,
do you ever watch reruns of that show and you're just like, oh, these are literally the women who I grew up surrounded by.
These women taught us this stuff. They did. It was them,
Yeah.
and then it was the actual beauty shop, the actual beauty parlor. Like those were the ladies, and they were talking about the same things and saying the same things and getting worked up about the same things.
Yep.
I think Rue McClanahan in Golden Girls is just perfect as well. She does such a good job. But all the Golden Girls are lovely. I love all of them. But that was a really good Southern accent as well. I think so.
Yeah.
I ran into this man at the produce counter, and he asked me to play tennis with him tonight, but I forgot that Big Daddy's baby brother, my dearest and nearest relative, is flying in at 7. This is such a dilemma. Whatever am I going to do?
Blanche, it doesn't sound like a dilemma at all.
Rose, you're right. Family you can see anytime, but a one-night stand only happens one night.
Well, and I was going to throw out Steel Magnolias too, which I feel like is not just the Dolly
yes.
Parton, the queen of all things, but there's something about the like gossipiness and kind of like the chaos of the wedding in Steel Magnolias where like they're shooting the birds out of the trees and the armadillo cake. Like it's got these really specific things to it that I think is really easy to get wrong. People think that like Southernness is like kooky, crazy gossip, but it's not totally what it is.
He captured it. I think it is a true statement that if you want to see what the South really is, Steel Magnolias is women in the South. Like all the way from the range of emotions that you get to experience, from the topics of what they're concerned about, to just the little tiny details. And if you see the play, it's all in the beauty shop. The whole thing happens in the beauty shop, and they rotate in and out of it. I think it's like a canon Southern.
Oh, definitely.
Southern movie.
I've seen multiple local productions of Steel Magnolias at this point.
Steel Magnolias is it. That's it right there. And then obviously you have Dolly, and Dolly is a treasure. She's our Appalachian queen, and I think she's just wonderful. And Appalachia is different than Southern. Like there's different accents there.
Her accent doesn't sound anything like yours or my parents. It's a different thing.
Even most Appalachian people that I talk to say that it's pronounced Appalachian, but Dolly Parton says Appalachian.
Does she really?
Who are we to get on to her for that? So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, you're from Mississippi. Like, I live in North Carolina, grew up in South Carolina. Like, they are part of the same reason, but they're really different. They're really just, like, physically far away. So, I mean, you've been on tour with your book and, doing stand-up and stuff like that. Like, when you're kind of out there traveling to places in the South or outside of it, and you're out here being like, I am from the South, do you kind of feel weird about the hugeness of that, about what you're being asked to stand for?
Now I do, now that you've said it that way. Oh, my gosh.
I mean, I feel like you've also been clear that, like, you have your Southern experience, which is not everybody else's, which I think is the way to do it.
I try to approach it because literally, like I've said this a few times, but one county over is so different than even Laurel and Jones County. Like everything is so different. And I really acknowledge that. And I try to come at everything from this is my experience with it. This is my perspective. What is your experience? I feel like the community online that we built is a community of people sharing their different experiences. I think that's what's fun about it, is that it's like my social media is like a safe place for you to come and share what your Southern accent might sound like.
Yeah.
So I guess when I go out and I'm on the road with people, my base setting is how do y'all sound compared to me? Do y'all say might could? Do y'all say palate? I love to, at every show, I will get to a point where I'm like, okay, here's your first test. Do y'all know what a palate is?
Yeah.
And if they know what a palate is, I'm like, okay, so you're not wealthy. Those little things. And I like to see how the different areas are. I'll tell you, Raleigh really knew everything I was talking about when I did show Raleigh.
So there's a lot of common
it was Carrie,
bonds.
technically, but yes, Raleigh really understood what I was saying. And then you go down through the South, everybody gets it. Get into Texas, they still get it. Went to California, they did not get it.
Did they like it anyway? Was it like, you're in this exotic...
They had no idea what I was talking about. So it was a totally different show. Like, I had to present it in a different way because I never want to make fun of the South. I feel like I'm bringing up topics that we're all involved in. So doing the California shows was different because I don't want to just be making fun of it, but I want to share the culture. So that was really fun. But then the least Southern place that I've been, the place that knew nothing about what I was talking about, like they didn't have a clue, South Florida. When I went to the Miami area, it was more... California was more Southern than South Florida to me as far as like how they sounded, what they knew what I was talking about. Like we had so many in my book, none of my editors were Southern. And so every time I sent a manuscript in, it would come back like solid red. They were like, what is this? We don't know what you're talking about. Like, this is not grammatically correct. So I had to like fight for everything in the book. And it ended up having footnotes and cross references. And the South Florida show ended up being like a giant footnote and a giant cross reference of me being like, okay, that meant... hold on, like having to explain everything to them. So everywhere knows Southern so far. The Midwest has a little bit of Southernness in them as well. Like they really relate to salads that aren't salads,
Yep, a lot of mayonnaise.
But they do have a different way of sound. They sound a little bit different. Once you get to like Missouri, it starts sounding a lot different.
Yeah, that's true. Well, there's also like Midwestern nice and Southern nice, which are like sort of the same, but then also sort of totally different. Like the way that you're friendly on the outside, but not on the inside, or vice versa. Like I feel like you can really get your wires crossed.
Definitely. The Midwest could trick me so fast because I would think they're all being so nice. If y'all are not actually being nice, Midwest, you've got me fooled because I think y'all are nice.
I think they're basically nice. I was listening to the episode of the podcast that you were doing where you were talking about your internet habits and talking about kind of like describing TikTok as if you're kind of like neighborhood gossip. Like you're like hearing what everybody's up to. You want to know everybody's stories. And I think the thing that people in Hollywood are always thinking about is how things like TikTok are like replacing television entirely. Like you can get stuff like that. You can get people's stories directly from them without ever having to go through a studio or a bunch of notes or people who are going to get it wrong. Does that kind of make sense to you that like stuff like what you're talking about on TikTok can really replace shows like The White Lotus if they're not careful about it?
It really does. I think there's something to be said for authenticity and being genuine. And even when you're working with, like, even on TikTok, if I'm working with a brand, you get a prompt, you've got a limit of things you can say and things you can't say and things you've got to do. So you've already limited the creativity just for a minute and a half TikTok, So then times that by a movie, and there's a lot of hands in that pot, and so it's not going to be as genuine of a product. Like I feel like it would be very difficult to pull out a very genuine movie because movies aren't made by individuals; they're made by a lot of people together. TikToks are made by individuals, pretty much. So we get that rawness, and you get that kind of unfiltered, not going through a few checks about it. And so now I can watch like this man with his bull and the drama that they have, or I can watch this lady with, she's got some permission rights in her backyard, like the neighborhood's using her backyard, but she doesn't want them to, but like they always have, that kind of drama is so fun to see, and it's so unfiltered and it's so right now. It's like in this moment, and that's kind of like really fun. Like there's a few things on TikTok that I'm waiting for later this week to find out about, because they're gonna
it's like watching a TV show. Like you gotta tune in for the next episode.
But it's just somebody from who knows where. And I think that is something that is a challenge that TV has. Not only do they have the challenge of maintaining the genuineness, I feel like, but then the short form content. Like we consume things so quickly and so easily, and they are in less than a minute packages or 3-minute packages, and it's really hard to grab people's attention now. So I feel like TV is in a fundamental state where it's got to really do stuff. But then you've got some great things on television right now that are capturing our attention. We've got Yellow Jackets, we've got The White Lotus, we've got The Pit. There's some incredible TV right now. Severance,
which you couldn't do on TikTok. Like those are all doing things that you can
on TikTok, right? So I feel like maybe we're at a moment where TV's like realized what they've got to do, because they've been killing it the past few weeks. Like, I mean, we're in a prime time of television right now with Severance and Yellow Jackets and all these things all at one time. This quality TV, and it's really good, but it is like the highest quality. So it's kind of like maybe we've removed the middle ground.
Yeah. You have to have like the silliest stuff that you can also watch TikTok at the same time.
Yes.
Like when you find yourself watching like Cupcake Wars or something, and then like the middle thing that you like doesn't quite grab you, people are just going to go on their phones, right?
Exactly.
I mean, there's like Hollywood is really kind of starting to figure out what they want to do partnering with creators. Like, Mr. Beast goes and gets an Amazon show. There's smaller examples of it. Like for you personally, like, not to reveal things you're not allowed to reveal, but like, what's your level of interest in that? What do you think works when the film and TV industry kind of tries to tap into what creators are building?
I am super interested in that. I've worked with some screenwriters and I've done pitches now left and right. Nobody's like picked up the pitch so far, but I think it's exciting. I think there's a good, do you know, well, you know Hacks, Meg Stalter?
Yeah.
Okay. I think she has done a very good job transitioning from social media star to actual television star. I mean, I think she's a television star, but I knew who she was because from social media. But don't you think
she's an icon on Hacks?
She's
absolutely
so good, and but she started just being a silly goose on TikTok and Instagram, whatever platform that was that we found her first. She was just being a silly goose, but she somehow transitioned that into a character that she plays, and I think that is really good. I think that is really good. When I talk to agents about like what I would like to do, I would love to transition to something like that because I feel like her characters are something that they're very close to her, so it's very genuine. Yeah. I feel like that's the way creator like me, like if I'm going to break out into film or movie, it would, at least in the beginning, need to be something like that. That's sort of like a character that's me written, like how she has characters written for her. So I feel like she's a good example of that crossover. I think she's done such a good job crossing over.
But so like 50 years ago, people would come to Hollywood because like that's the only way it could be known. I can get my name out there. And now like you have a following, you have your audience. But it sounds like film and TV, even though they're like kind of different from the stuff that you're doing, they still offer something in terms of creative expression that, your own channels can't quite do.
Definitely. Well, there's something to being able to tell the full story. Even like with the difference in stand-up and the short form content that I do. Stand-up is an hour. I've got to fill an hour, which has never been a problem for me. I could fill the whole day if y'all will stay here, But it's different things. Like the storytelling is different. When I'm on stage for stand-up and I've got the hour, the stories are longer. I get to go into more detail about them. It's not a quick, immediate reward for the audience. Like you've got to kind of pay attention a little bit more. And that's just the format. Film and TV do the same thing. And I think that's just so interesting how you can go between the two, I really love doing stand-up because of that. It's kind of given me a little glimpse into stretching comedy into a different form.
Yeah. I feel like we're always going to have, Hollywood getting things wrong in some way, but it feels like TikTok making it possible for people like you from all over the country to become visible. Like you can go work on something and be like, that's not how they would say it in Mississippi. Like there's some way you can get more real people out there through this process, I think.
And that's like exactly what I sound like in every one of those rooms. I'm like, well, that's not what we would say. We would say, that, and I feel like it's annoying after a little while. But yeah, that's the truth. It's the truth. It's that, again, goes back to authenticity. How authentic can it be? People sniff it out in a second.
Yeah,
the moment
totally.
It's not authentic. And that is where we are as a society today. It's got to be real because we all are faced with each other all the time.
Yeah. No, I'm kind of scared of TikTok and the way that you can like be on there and be real to yourself, but also talking into a camera. And like, it feels like it just takes time to learn and like how to not completely twist yourself around and be like, who am I anymore? Who is the real me? Like, it sounds like you figured it out.
Well, and it's so strange because it's so isolating because you're just talking to a phone. You're not talking to this giant audience. And after a while, the numbers just kind of merge together. So it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. And so it's really strange. It's a really strange world to be popular on TikTok. And then small town, everybody knew me here already.
Yeah, because you were the teacher,
Well, and you grow up in a small town, everybody knows you. So that's not very different. Now my life is kind of like when I go other places, I feel like I'm in the same small town because somebody's going to come up to me. But I feel like I've been trained for my whole life to do that because somebody's going to go tell my daddy what I'm doing when I leave my house. Now it's just everybody. Now it's anywhere in the world.
Yeah, when people talk about having an invasion of privacy as a famous person, you're like, try living in my hometown.
Right. Like you should
have a moment of peace.
Look, warm up in Laurel for like a year and you'll be ready. You'll be ready. You'll know how to handle it.
Well, to wrap it up, your book is going to be out soon. Why should people buy your book, bless your heart? I'm sitting here with a copy of it. It's got a fantastic cover, honestly. That might be one of the reasons.
I'm so glad.
It's a delight.
So good. did. My friend.
Oh, you have a copy too?
I have a
Perfect.
copy of, I finally got the hardcover, like the actual
I just have
book.
the paperback galley. Yours looks even better.
But yes, no, my friend Adam Trest illustrated this with me. He illustrated Aaron Napier's book, and he's a great author, and I mean a great artist and author. And then Kate, my wife, actually did some field sketches like of the little things.
Cool.
So it's just a combination of love. It's like, you know, when we were younger, there were all those books that were like discovering things because we didn't have the internet yet. So it was like Encyclopedia Britannica and like those big zoo books and things like that.
Yeah.
I loved field guides and things of that nature. And that's what this turned into. I didn't mean for it to, but it did turn into that because of the people that were editing it didn't know what I was talking about. And I'm really glad because if you're Southern, you're going to love you're going to love like exploring all the things that we do and say and all the fun stuff. Like that's so fun. But if you're not Southern, it's like quite literally like an academic situation. Like you actually will learn stuff. It's like a literal field guide. I think it would be valuable if you were going to come here to have read this book, but it's mostly just fun. It's like, I wanted it to be like those chicken soup books from when we were younger.
Oh,
like
yeah.
you just pick it up and pop open any chapter and read that little part, you know, you don't have to read the whole thing. And it really turned into that. I couldn't believe they made me write every word of this book. And they did, and it was hard, so y'all read it because I had to do the work for it.
I feel like we should send a copy to any Hollywood scriptwriter or anybody who wants to make something set in the South. They have to read your book first and make sure they get the Duke's Mayo right, and then you'll be fine.
Yes.
Well, Landon, thank you for being here. Thank you for talking all things White Lotus with me. I have not been able to stop thinking about Parker Posey and her voice and your video on it. And yeah, everyone should come see you on book tour and buy your book and understand the South finally.
I agree, and I can't wait to see all y'all. Thanks for having me.
That does it for today's episode. This podcast is edited by Brett Fuchs and produced by Brett Fuchs and me. Our theme music is by Dave Gonzalez. Thanks again to my guest, Landon Bryant. Subscribe to the Prestige Junkie newsletter at theankler.com. Subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We will see you next week.